Hi everyone. Today we are talking about the age-old concept, insecurity, the friendship killer. Dun dun dun! Alright, so today we decided that we wanted to talk about insecurity, especially considering that this is our first episode of Fantastic. I know what you're saying, Ian. I have already seen 17 of these episodes. What do you mean that this is number one? Well, I'm here to tell you. Those were kind of practice, but we wanted to talk about insecurity, especially because for the first season of Fantastic, we want to focus on friendships. And the question that I was thinking about the other day was whether or not you can be insecure and still be a good friend.
It kind of depends on the severity of your insecurity. You know, sometimes you can be super insecure. Like, throwback to me when I was a very, very insecure person. I held on very tightly onto, like, one of my friends. And I became very insecure. And I just, like, was very...
What is the punch?
I know. I just was holding on to them really tight.
Gotcha.
And I think, like, that pushed me away from everyone else. And then ultimately them. They all let me go. Because I was obviously a really bad friend.
Yeah.
Because of how severe my case of insecurity was.
Right.
But I don't know if I feel like it's not that common to be that level of insecure.
Yeah.
Like,
and I think also, like, when we're talking about insecurity, we're not talking about, like, I'm so, like, sad. Because, like, everyone goes through that. But I would say the level of insecurity that we're talking about is when it starts to actually affect your friendship. When it starts to, like, manifest in this weird, strange, negative way, then it's become, like, maybe not, right? Because I don't think I can say that everyone is a secure person, because I still have a lot of insecurities.
Yeah.
But I'm able to recognize those moments, and so, like, they don't really affect my friendship that deeply.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
What's your, like, since you don't get as insecure, do you ever, like, feel
Insecure?
Not feel insecure, but, like, could you see it in people? Now, because you have experienced it yourself?
Yes. When it comes to insecure people, like, you can sniff that out. Easy, you know?
Yeah.
Like, people can sniff that out easily because, like, when you're an insecure person, there's, like, little things that you do that feels like a little insecure.
Yeah.
You know? Where it's like, oh, that joke is a little bit too serious.
Yeah.
It's like, you're like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
When they're just like, when they have, like, it's funny sometimes when you're making jokes that are like, what are they called? Like
Self-deprecating jokes?
Self-deprecating jokes. But then there are people who are making self-deprecating jokes and you're like, oh shit, dude, like, that's real. Like,
Yeah. And I think, like, you probably can tell when you can sniff it out. Maybe not everyone can, but I feel like you can because you have been in that position.
Yeah.
So now you're like, oh, this is like my old self.
Yeah.
I feel like that's happened before where instead of it being a self-deprecating joke, I remember this one girl, I was just, like, eating with a group of friends, and this other group of, like, teenage girls comes in, right? Whatever. They're doing their own thing. And then one of the people in my group was like, oh my god, look at them. And then started, like, making fun of them. And then I was like, I like, made eye contact with one of my older friends.
Yeah.
And we both, like, after that conversation, we were like, that is so being a teenage girl where you're, like, insecure. So you, like, you could recognize it because you've gone through that phase and, like, everyone has gone through that
you know
phase.
what? And even, like, let's say if, like, you're hanging out with new people and the person that you just met, who you're kind of building a friendship with, insults someone else, and it's like, what?
Yeah.
Why are you doing
It's
that?
like an ego.
It's a little gross.
Like a power play almost.
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna push you down so you know who's on top.
Right,
you know?
but I think people who are secure, confident, they could see that and they're just like, I actually kind of don't want to hang out with you.
Yeah. It's, like, not cool.
Yeah, why are you bringing people down for what?
Yeah.
Like, why are we using our energy in this way? Like, for what? You know? So that's why you could spot it from a mile away. I think the thing that I think about first for me and how I have been affected by insecurity, especially now, is that, like, when it comes to making new friends, I'm very hesitant and scared if I feel like the person who I want to be friends with is cooler than me.
I see.
You know? So, like, for instance, there was this girl that I had this, like, I wanted to be her friend, you know? But I came across as, like, this guy that was, like, kissing the ground that she walked on. You know?
I think I know who you're talking
Yeah,
about.
I think you know who I'm talking about. And like it's funny because like when you're insecure and you're trying to make a new friend, you don't come across as a friend, you come across as a fan.
Yeah.
And so like every time that I interacted with her, I always felt like, oh my god, she's so much cooler than I am.
Oh my god, the things she's doing, like
Yeah.
we have to do this because she's
Right.
she's doing it, you know.
Right, and I think for her, because like I've been on the receiving end of this, is that like you kind of feel this sense of like, oh, they're putting me on a pedestal. That's weird. That's a lot of pressure and like,
Yeah.
like you don't want to be with them. And I think it also prevented me from being myself because I was too dependent on how they would react.
Yeah.
You know, like now I'm a little bit better in the sense of like compatibility, like our previous episode of like, if they're not laughing at my jokes, it's okay. Our humors just don't align. I think with this friend, it was like, if they're not laughing at my jokes are so bad. I'm embarrassing, you know? So I think that's like prevented me. And I think I'm trying to spot that more. And I think that the only way to kind of improve that is to get better and be more confident in who I am as a person.
Yeah.
And just say like, hey, I have something to offer in any relationship. And so let me just approach you and say like, hey, I love your outfit. Like, let's be friends, you know?
Yeah,
Or I
yeah.
love your energy if I meet someone at a
be more
concert.
casual,
Be more casual
yeah.
about it versus it being like, you're the coolest person I've ever met.
Oh my God,
Like, thank
I
you so
really
much.
wanna
You're
be like,
freaking,
oh
yeah,
my
you're
God.
freaking amazing. Like, oh my gosh. Don't want to do that.
Yeah. Not I feel like you can get the ick from that.
Yeah.
Like I
Oh,
feel
100%.
it's like kind of icky when someone is like just putting you up on a pedestal and then also like romanticizing you, because like I think like if someone were to do that to me, I feel like I'm aware like I'm actually not like that at all, and like it just makes you feel kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because now it's like, what if the person you're putting a pedestal on is like, if I do something wrong, will that shatter their image of me? And then you're kind of worried about that, or maybe you're not, but you know, like there's that risk when you put someone on a pedestal. They might have those concerns.
Yeah, and I think it's also like when you're putting someone on a pedestal, you're not being present with them in the moment, right? You're like over analyzing everything that they're doing, and you're just like, oh, that's a cool way to do it.
Yeah.
You know?
Instead of it, that's just them. It's
Yeah.
like, that's cool. Like
Yeah.
that's that specific adjective.
And I think it also puts a lot of weight to the person because it's like now they have to play this character of being this cool person instead of just being themselves.
Yeah.
You know? And it's like, I think that's something that's prevented me from like, this is gonna be so off topic, but it's totally fine, relevant. But it's like, oh, you know, I could never imagine myself seeing someone who I've seen on social media in real life and being cool with it. I remember during Halloween, the story I told you when I met Erica?
Yeah.
And I was like, I cannot go up to her. Homegirl's actually just like really tall. I think she's like 5'9" or 5'7" or
I
something.
think she's probably just 5'7".
She's probably 5'7", around 5'6". And I remember seeing her, and I'm like, if I just saw her casually walking around like Erewhon, I'm like, I could not go up to her and be like a cool, casual, hey, friendship guy.
Yeah.
I would have to be like, hey, girl, like, how are you? You know? Yeah, exactly. And I think like to her, then again, I don't come across as a friend. I'm coming across as a fan.
Yeah.
And like when you're coming across as a fan to someone who doesn't actually like have a social media following or isn't like in that realm, it's like weird.
I feel like for me, I don't think I get like insecure with new people.
Yeah.
I think I don't know why.
Okay. Just old people?
No,
Oh, you get insecure by old people.
New people.
New people.
Yeah, like you know how you said like when you meet someone new.
Okay.
Right? I don't think I get like that, but I do find myself like if I'm on social media for a little too long,
Yeah.
like I will get insecure, and that's why.
By the people that you already know?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think like yeah, actually, because it's like I think like as a habit, like if I'm bored, I'll pull out my phone and start scrolling, and then I see like, oh, they're hanging out and like they're doing all of this, because obviously you're posting your best self on social media.
Yeah.
And then I have this, I'm like, I'm just relaxing right now on my bed. Like I'm not at the beach right now, or I'm not going on a vacation for the holidays, you know?
Yeah,
And then I start getting insecure, or like, whoa, look at their big friend group in college. Wow. And then, you know, like I just start having all these desires and insecurities for things that I don't actually want or necessarily have thought about. So I like just get off social media, because I'm like, that's why I just delete my account every like couple months, and I think my friends are kind of used to
you know what, social media will kind of do that to you, especially like when you don't have the context. I remember going back to that person that I was talking about, I remember hanging out with them for the first time and then seeing how they like took photos for the life that they were presenting online. And I was like, oh, I was like, oh, that's it. Like, all it is just them snapping a photo of them like looking good. And I'm like, I love that for them.
Yeah.
But in my head, I thought it was more for some reason. In my head, I thought it was like
it was like a whole, in your head, you gave it context when you're like seeing it. You're like, oh my God, they're like doing all of this. But it's like, in reality, it's like they took probably 5 minutes to go. And then the rest of the hangout was just an ordinary day.
Right. And I remember too, there was another thing that I went to recently, and it looked really fun in the videos. Mm-hmm. And I remember showing my friend, and I was like, dude, check this out. Let me tell me what you think.
I was
Oh, were you? Yeah. I was like, I was like, hey, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I remember.
And you were like, yeah, people look like they're having so much fun. Mm-hmm. And I was
like,
there.
Like, it looks like hype like crazy.
Yeah, it looked hype like crazy. But I was there, and I was like, it wasn't that fun.
Yeah.
Like, or at least it wasn't my type of fun.
Yeah.
Is what I'm saying. And so, like, it actually adds a lot of, it helps me a lot, because now that I've been in those situations where I'm like, wait, I was there in person, and I knew the vibe. So that way, when I look at other people's social media, I'm like, maybe it wasn't that fun. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe I shouldn't be jealous. Maybe it wasn't what I wanted anyway. Yeah. You know, so I stopped being that like envious and like that insecure when I see people online. Mm-hmm. But that's just because I thought it was so interesting. Because like literally in the video, it's like, dang, this is so hype. Like everyone's having a great time. And then like in person, I'm literally just. It was like fun for 30 seconds. Yeah. You know, and then that 30 seconds, everyone whipped out like their flashlights, their phone, everything. Yeah. But then afterwards, it was kind of like, all right. Yeah. That's it. Another thing is that like for insecurities, it's like a huge ick for me. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was like, for the preparation of this video, I wanted to think about, okay, when was the times that I had icks and like, who were they with? And I'm like trying to think back, and I'm like, I can't think of anything because they're not in my life. I was like trying to think about like, oh, who are the friends that give me icks because they're insecure in a way that like affects our relationship? And I'm like, I can't think of any because they're not my friends. Yeah. Because I don't want to be friends with people who are insecure in a way that negatively affects the relationship. Yeah. Like again, it's okay to be insecure if you're insecure, right? To yourself. But like when it affects the relationship and you're like a huge downer and it's like a negative. Like projecting it. You're projecting it. I'm like, let's not be friends. Mm-hmm. How about you figure that out yourself? Then we could be friends. But like now I'm saying it. Does that make me sound like a douchebag or no?
No, I don't think so. Okay. I think you're just being like honest. Yeah. You know, it is honest. Like I think some people have a bigger capacity of like how much patience in terms of patience to hear those things. Yeah. But like with that person who like made fun of that group that I mentioned, like that was the only instance where I've gotten the ick, and it was so bad that I like after that I stopped talking to them. Yeah. Because I was just so like, I was so annoyed by it. But they still have friends, you know? Those friends of theirs probably like, maybe that insecurity doesn't come out, and maybe I'm just not the right person for them. I don't think you're necessarily like a douchebag for just being like.
Yeah, it's just being honest. Yeah. I'm just being honest. So in doing this research, we actually have 6 different ways that insecurity manifests in your own life. But I will start with the definition of insecurity as defined by Abraham Maslow. He says this: an insecure person is someone who perceives the world as a threatening jungle and most human beings as dangerous and selfish, feels like a rejected and isolated person, anxious and hostile, is generally pessimistic and unhappy, shows signs of tension and conflict, tends to turn inward, is troubled by guilt feelings, has one or another disturbance of self-esteem, tends to be neurotic, and is generally selfish and egocentric. I thought it was really important because what we're going to be talking about is like the lenses at which you see the world when you're an insecure person, and how that affects your friendships. Yes. And your relationships, but in this case, particularly friendships. The first way is that you have a really strong comparison filter when you're insecure, right? And that means that when you're with other people, it's kind of annoying when you're with this person, because that means that whatever you do, they just immediately compare themselves to you, and they're taken out of the present. Yeah. You know, it's like when your friend tells you information, the immediate thought is like, how does this look on me? when it's like it's not about you. You know, like for instance, if your friend just says, "Oh my gosh, I'm gonna get married," and you're like, "Fuck, I'm single," like you know what I mean? It's like, fuck, I'm single. I'm like lonely and shit. Like, fuck, like, you know?
Where am I in my life?
Like, where am I in my life? You know?
Instead of celebrating.
Exactly. And so, like, that's one way is that, like, you tend to compare yourselves to people when really you don't need to be because you're not actually celebrating your friend. You're not being in the present, in the moment, and you're a little annoying.
Yeah, I completely agree. The second way insecurity manifests in your friendships would be something called like the validation seeking pattern, where you're always just like, do I look good? Or like, are we friends? Are we still friends?
Oh, that's so annoying.
You know what I mean?
Jesus.
Like, I think one good example of this is like when you're very aware of like how the timing of a text message or like a sigh, which is very specific. But like these are all things that don't necessarily matter. If your friend has lagged, I feel like, and you're in this like lens of like seeking validation, you're like, oh no, they lagged. They must hate me. You know, they're lagging because they literally don't want to talk to me, and they think if they like texted me right now, I would text right back. They knew I would text right back. Right. You know, like that. You just kind of go through these crazy mental hoops because you're just like, are we friends? Are we not friends? You know, and you just like you just keep wanting validation and like you're just looking for it in every small thing. Also, like if you're in person, their body language or like when they take a deep breath, you might take everything they do just a little too personally, and that's just because you're insecure and you're like not sure where the state of the friendship is. So you're busy like
you're like searching. And a lot of these things is that like it's taking you out of the present, right? Like now you're not focused again on having fun and enjoying the relationship and the friendship because you're just like, oh my gosh, they texted me. So now I have to reply like to match their text lag. And it's like 2 hours. So now I can't reply back to them. It's like, bro, just fucking reply. Like, it's not that deep. They're probably busy, you know?
Yeah. And then the other side of this, besides like taking things personally, is like also going out of your way to do things to please them. You know, like, I guess one example is if you're already tired and your friends invite you out, if you're worried about the state of the friendship and if you guys are actually friends, you might agree to do these things that are out of your comfort zone or like that are beyond your boundaries, just so you're like, okay, we're still friends because I went to that hangout, you know? So they don't hate me anymore.
You don't really enjoy it?
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Or maybe like you don't enjoy it not because of them, but just because like you're tired at that moment. Or like you know you have a busy next day. Yeah. You're just like pushing your boundaries or going over your boundaries just so you could please other people. Because you want that validation in the friendship. If I miss this hangout, then maybe they won't see me as friends, you know?
Yeah. And that's pretty whack. The next thing is a self-fulfilling dynamic. This hits personally for me because I feel like I was in a lot of these myself. And like what this is when you're acting in a way where you're trying to prevent something from happening, but in doing that thing, you are actually making it happen. You know, like let's say for instance, you don't get invited to hang out because assuming like your friends just thought you were busy or maybe they thought you weren't interested in the thing. And so what you do as a way to like defend yourself is you take it internally, right? And then now you actually don't talk to them or like you stop talking in the group chat because you're just like, well, they don't want to hang out with me, and so who the frick cares? And so I won't hang out with them. But then because you're not active in the group chat, it's like, well, they stopped inviting you because you're not active and you're not showing interest. And so it's like this weird cycle of like, oh, you're trying to prevent hurt from your friends, but in doing so, you're actually perpetuating the actions that you want them not to do.
Yeah.
Another example I have written down is that, like, let's say, again, you don't get invited to hang out. And so instead of asking about like, oh, like, you know, why wasn't I invited? Like, I'd love to go to this thing and being healthy about like that interaction and just saying like, I actually love hikes. You guys didn't know? You know, I'd love to go next time. You know, that's a healthy way. Instead, you're just like, you throw your own events but you don't invite those people that go on the hike,
Oh.
you know? And then now your friends are gonna be like, dude, you've thrown like 3 events, but you didn't invite us. Are we still friends? It's like, and you don't even respond because you just think that like, oh, like they don't like me, so I don't like them. And it's like this weird dynamic of just like,
You're kind of getting back at them.
just communicate.
Yeah.
Just tell them like, it's, why do you do that? And I used to do that all the freaking time.
Whoa.
I think so.
I had no idea.
Yeah, like I think I was just so hurt sometimes where I'm like, oh, I didn't get invited. And so I'm going to spend my time with the people that care about me, you know? But I think in doing so, it's like you push people away just so that you could feel the sense of like strength
Yeah.
when it's unfounded, where it's like,
power?
Yeah, the sense of power of like, I'm doing my own thing. But it's like, no, I really want to hang out with you guys. Like, please, you know? So I felt this one too.
The fourth way insecurity can manifest in your friendships is by creating like an authenticity barrier. This is basically like where you're inauthentic to your friends because you're afraid of like showing your true self, because that makes you more susceptible to being like vulnerable. And then like what if they hurt you, or what if they drop you because you're like being your true self. And I think like that's a huge fear you can get when you're insecure, because I think when you're insecure you're just worried about how people will perceive you, and it is the worst feeling for for your closest friends to drop you after you've been your real self. And
or like close friends, you know, because that is huge. I would say, because like you can't have good relationships without being yourself.
One thing that I had written down, or when we were doing research, was that like my bad, it's way easier to be friends with someone who's giving themselves to you, like someone who opens up to you. I think that is signaling you like, oh, I can open up to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. You know, there was something that I actually texted my friend last week. And I remember I was up like at 4 in the morning and I was like super late. And I remember just sending this weird ass text. And I remember telling my friend about it the other day. And I was like, yeah, like I just sent, I sent a text because I wanted to rush the friendship. And like I wanted to speed run it, you know?
Yeah.
And it worked. And it's like similar, it's like kind of like the same realm of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Is like in the opposite way, I was being so authentic and I was being so weird in myself, but the person matched my energy to a T, and I was like, this friendship is gonna go the distance.
Yeah.
You know, like I had sent them this really long ramble of me just saying how it's so nice, or it sucks that people have lost the art of long text messages. So the whole text message was just me being like, oh, I miss having like long text messages, like especially this one. And this one is a really long text message because like it's so nice that it fills up the whole phone. And I was just like, it was just like unnecessary.
Yeah.
In every way. But then I woke up the next morning and then they had sent me like the same thing. She was like, oh my gosh, like actually I know what you're talking about. Like I love text messages, especially when it's like an apology or like a little, I was like, this is it.
Yeah.
You know, and I think you have to have this sense of like willingness to be authentic in yourself in order to find the good friends that you're most compatible with.
Yeah.
And that's okay, you know?
Yeah.
I think like I can't imagine myself having to withhold myself and like the silly jokes I make, or the funny sounds or the accents, or just like when I like Betty's baguette, la la la, you know what I mean? Like if I am not able to do that with you when we're just together, it's like, why am I even here? Like why?
Yeah.
Why? Who am I gonna do that with? In the mirror? I already do that. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so like I feel for people who, and I'm sure I felt this way too, but I feel for people who feel like they can't be authentic with their close friends just because they're scared that revealing themselves might prevent that friendship from continuing. When when in reality, it's like the most special feeling to do something that is like naturally you, but then be accepted for it.
Yeah. It is a really nice feeling. And I think when you're afraid of like getting rejected, if you do happen to get rejected after being your true self, I feel like you're just going toward the right direction.
Yeah.
You know, getting rejected is supposed to be like redirection. And I think like now you know you're not wasting your time by like being with this person who doesn't even like your jokes, who doesn't even like get along with your humor or like have the same values as you. But they'll only know your values and like your humor if you open up to them.
And you put it out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to try.
I'm so glad that we did the episode before this one because I feel like all of it kind of relates. You know, like, whoa, crazy. Where like last episode we were talking about compatibility and how like a lot of things is just not personal. It's like just because they're not laughing at that one joke that you like to do doesn't mean that they hate your guts. It just means that that's not their humor and that's okay. Make sure to watch that one if you're lit it. Okay, and so the second to last one is the control response. And so as we were doing research, this one is a little bit interesting because you are taking on, when you're insecure in a friendship, you're taking on someone who has a lot of responsibility and care within the friendship. The easiest way for me to describe this is if you imagine a group and it's the person trying to please the group leader, you know? It's like you are doing everything where it's like, oh, does everyone have their wallets? Does everyone have their phone? You know, but like unnecessarily so, not in a caring way, but just because you want to feel like you're needed. You're the first person to like help book the flights. You're the person to help like figure out what the itinerary is for the trip.
Oh, okay.
You know, not because like you care about it. It's because like you want to feel like you're needed in the group.
Yeah.
Another example of this is that like when you give yourself to your friend a lot, to this group or like your friend, but they don't reciprocate it, it's like now you're super offended, right? Because instead of doing this because you care about the person, you're doing this because you're hoping that they'll reciprocate and like that's the only reason why. And so when they don't, you feel like, oh, dang, that sucks.
Yeah, like if the friendship is super conditional.
Yeah.
Like if this person does it, then okay, I'll do it back.
Yeah. And so you're trying to be like this extra person from the very beginning only so that they can reciprocate. I don't get upset when they don't reciprocate the energy that I bring forward. But when they do, I'm like, okay, that's awesome. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
You know? But yeah, I thought this was really interesting because it's just a different lens when you're insecure.
Yeah, and I feel like the difference between like what you said or what you do and like the point that you just listed off is that like someone who is insecure will just use whatever that isn't being done as like ammo.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah.
Like it's not for you. It's like, okay, I guess I won't be friends with them, but like it's not anything personal. It's like, okay, now I know. Like
Yeah. Or like I won't push it forward.
Yeah, but I think with someone who's insecure, it's like you already don't have that many friends. I'm gonna assume. So you're like,
Yeah.
You're like if this friend or if this person doesn't do something, it's like I'm gonna keep that in the back of my head, but I'm still gonna be friends with you. And then now you have this bitterness towards
Yeah,
them.
and you're building like this weird resentment that's going on, and you're just like,
and they don't even know. The other person doesn't even know that they did something wrong. They didn't do anything personal to you. You have just kept that in your head instead of like addressing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The last way insecurity manifests is past projection, where because you're so afraid of your past and what has happened in your past, and maybe you're insecure about that, you project it onto your friendships, and that makes you maybe like hyper vigilant on what's gonna happen, like about your actions, and like, oh, if I do this, will this happen? Like how it did in the past. And then now you're just too worried about the past that you're not even present in the friendship, and you're not even focused on like what could be happening right now and how your current friendship can be growing, because you're just like, but what if the same thing from the past happens?
Yeah, and I think it's like you're kind of putting this identity on the new people that you're meeting and that you're trying to be friends with, because you're just like, what if they're mean? Like the people who have hurt me in the past. And then now it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy where it's like, because you think that they're going to be mean, you're not being authentic. And because you're not being authentic, you don't feel like the friendship is growing. And so you push them away. And it's like this whole cycle of like insecurity in friendships, which kind of suck.
I feel like with this last point, it's like you being worried about the past will just make you play into all of the other things we listed before.
Yeah.
Like you said, like you might seek validation because you're like, my friends back then, they did this and this. So if I do this and like seek validation in this way, then maybe it'll work. And then, now you're insecure and now you're annoying again, you know, and now no one wants to hang out with you because you're too focused on like pleasing people instead of actually being like an authentic friend. Yeah.
Any closing thoughts as it relates to insecurity and friendship?
I would say that like if you do find yourself in doing any of these things, it's okay. Take a deep breath. You're not a terrible person. It's just good to recognize this and then move forward. How do you move forward? Probably think about why you're insecure, and like trying to work through that is a good step. But it's good that you've acknowledged it, and I don't think you're a bad person for being insecure.
Yeah, no. Everyone is insecure, but I think if it's like if you're doing stuff to like manipulate people because of that insecurity, or you're doing stuff and you know that it hurts the other person.
Yeah, you're being like toxic.
Yeah,
and
if you're being gossipy, like just don't do that. But I think like I don't know, being insecure. If you want to have good friendships, especially like since this season is about friendships, the number one thing is probably being able to not be insecure. Like or just like recognizing and working towards it, because like nobody wants to be around someone who is just negative and being a downer.
It's completely different to be like insecure and not do anything about it, and then being insecure and trying to work through that. But like if you're honest with your friends, hey, I'm kind of insecure.
Yeah.
I think opening that conversation up to someone will help them learn how to support you and like take away that insecurity, alleviate it.
Yeah.
But if you keep it to yourself and you're insecure and you're doing all these toxic things,
Why?
Why?
If you're made it this far, you're probably super chill and want to improve and stuff, and same vibe.
Yeah. And then also if you I feel like it'll be very interesting if you like are listening to this and you like recognize when a friend did one of these actions.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel? I would love to hear your thoughts about that in the comments.
Yeah.
I don't know. That'd be interesting to read about. But yeah, that's all for today's episode, right?
There is one more thing that we do have to talk about. Okay, so for one of our episodes, we did get a comment, and since we're a very, very, very small channel,
might as well answer.
We want to respond to every single comment. But this guy, he had a question specifically about compatibility, I believe. His question was, how do you manage keeping your friendship fresh and not stale/boring?
I feel like that just comes with experiencing new things together.
Yeah.
And that could be watching a new show.
Yeah.
That like finding new topics like that, or you yourself experiencing new things.
Yeah.
I feel like our friendship, like you and I, our friendship grew more when like he does more interesting stuff. I do more interesting stuff. We do interesting stuff together, like taking that acting class. I feel like that made our friendship much more interesting and like not stale.
Yeah.
Because now we have like a whole new set of things to talk about since we're having this experience.
That's an interesting question. I don't look at my friendships and I think, oh, what a boring friendship this is becoming. I think those friendships just kind of fade away. Like the friendships that are interesting, that you're doing new stuff with together, I feel like those are the friendships that remain. But I also would implore you to think about like, what are your values as a person in terms of like what makes you interested in life, and if maybe that's different from what your friend finds interesting in life, then that means maybe you're not compatible in that way.
Yeah.
Right? Like let's say for instance, you might think it's a boring friendship because you're not trying new things, whereas your friend might be like, no, this friendship is amazing. We get to play the same video game every single night. And it's like, oh, well then in that case, he's enjoying it or she's enjoying it, but that's because they value that specific activity and specific vibe, whereas you might value trying something different. So I would say like it depends on what your definition of fresh is and like what matters to you as a person and what you're seeking in that friendship. The second question that this person asked, he said, have you ever had experiences going the extra mile for a friend, but it's not reciprocated? Yes, all the time, but that's okay. I tend to go a little extra on my friendships, or at least I try to. I don't know if they're extra, but I think for me, they're just kind of normal. I don't even think they're extra. Actually, I think I do the bare minimum. Because like I feel like saying that I do the extra is like not the case. I think it's like bare minimum for a good friendship. Sometimes that's not reciprocated, and that's totally fine. I'm not sure how old this person is, but I would say like the older you get, the more people you'll meet. And with the more people you'll meet, the more you realize that like specific people just don't vibe with you, and that's okay. But I think like I have gone the extra mile several times. I will say also, now that I'm thinking about it, is that friends have gone the 5 extra miles for me, but I was too immature to recognize it as going the extra mile, and I didn't reciprocate, and so I lost that friend, and now I'm like sad about it. Or I was, where I'm like, oh my gosh, they were so nice to me on my birthday because they did X, Y, and Z. And then later on, I come to realize, oh my gosh, wait, that friend was someone worth keeping.
Yeah.
I should have reciprocated that. I should have matched the energy, because now none of my friends do that for me or do that particular extra thing for me, you know?
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, I might be reading into the question a little too much, but I feel like it's implying like kind of a negative connotation when it's not reciprocated. But I think like as you like you said, if you do go the extra mile and they don't reciprocate it, they probably will think about you like that. Like a way where it's like, man, they did do that. They did do that nice thing. You know, not like a gotcha. Can't believe you never reciprocated.
No.
It's just like I'm such a good person, and we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
And people will remember you as a good person, or as the person who goes the extra mile. And now that's what you are.
That's your vibe. That's who you are as a person. No one can take that away from you. I think another thing is that, like, when you go the extra mile and you find someone else who matches the energy, boom, it's a great friendship, because now you're just like, let's just be friends. Like I used to have a friend who, he would always say, who's gonna treat us this good if not us? And I think you kind of bring that same energy to your friendships if you're asking this question of like, what if it's not reciprocated? Well, you'll have friends who will reciprocate, and then you guys will just live a happy life of like, all of our friends. Like, imagine being part of a community that every single time there's a birthday, like, you go all out. You know, you have like birthday cake, you have like streamers and decorations, and you have a theme, and you have like a menu for the dinner that you guys are gonna make. And you know, like, all of it is like super special. If you have that energy, like, you're attracting the people with the same energy, because they can recognize it and they want to keep you as a friend. And then boom, you're having a good time.
Yeah. So I would say, just if it does happen to you, don't worry about it, because the right people will find you.
Yes.
I feel like it is really special to be remembered in that way. You know,
it is.
Wow, they're that friend, the friend who just goes the extra mile to do that.
Thank you, Mad Setso, for responding to one of our videos. I really appreciate it. Thanks again for listening to our first episode of Fantastic. We'll see you again in the next one, next Thursday, 8:30 in the morning, Pacific Coast time. All right.
Bye.